we're trying to do to make sure that we've got safe aircraft at all times. Thank you.
Excellent. So then along with the rest of the equipment with the airplane, we got our tow lines requirements for weak link braking strengths and tow line braking strengths. So if you're not familiar, you can go back and look at those, but the gist of it is either the tow line has to be between 80 to 200% of the glider's gross weight for its braking strength, or if it's above that, then the tow weak links on both the glider end and the tow plane end have to be somewhere within that 80 to 200 range. And the tow plane end has to be 25% stronger than the glider weak link end. Just a nice little thing to know. All right, and then along with operations, so these are all the other regulatory rules that may come into where you're operating within the National Airspace System and just what you're doing in general. I'd like to address the TFRs and NOTAMs at first there. I don't have a slide in it later, but a couple things to make sure with those is anyone who's flying on any given day should be familiar with any TFRs if they're around the area. A couple I've seen before is the presidential ones. Those can go out beyond 30 miles. They're massive, and they can pop up only within a few hours. So sometimes it warrants even another check the morning of when you're flying, along with firefighting TFRs as well. I remember one day flying, going up towards the Riscony, and then came back and looked up on the computer later that day, and sure enough, there was a firefighting TFR out there, so they can just pop up anywhere they may please. And then along with the stadium closures for like Virginia Tech football events, that's not very far. You probably only have to worry about that if you're doing cross country towards Blacksburg. And everyone knows when the teching is. So. And towing gliders and weak links, so that's just some errata rounding up the end of that there. The one I'd like to point out is glider and tow pilot agreed on course of action, speeds and signals and emergency procedures. So we're all pretty well accustomed to that. That'll be covered later with some of the ground launch signals and signals in flight between glider and tow plane. Parachutes and parachuting, so this is if you're doing aerobatics, 60 degrees bank, 30 degrees pitch up or down. You need a parachute. And if you do have one, it has to be repacked according to these intervals here. If it's all synthetic, 180 days. If it's has any natural fibers in it all, it's 60. An aerobatic flight. So no aerobatic flight when you're over a congested area within a federal airway, in controlled airspace of an airport, including Roanoke. There's no reason you'd ever do that though, unless you had an aerobatics box worked out with Roanoke. Or within 4 miles of a federal airway, including Victor Airways, below 1500 AGL or 3 miles flight visibility. And just to show you an idea of what that area of federal airways is, it's a little hard to see with the projector. I didn't realize it's going to be like that, but you can see the shaded areas around the Victor Airways. That's all area where you can't do acrobatics. So you can see Newcastle's right there. We got a nice little section just west of north of the field. So it's just kind of interesting.
You turn the lights off. Then
yeah.
Close enough.
Points across though. Then supplemental oxygen, that's pretty straightforward. We're all pretty familiar with that. Up to 12,500 above that, you need to be on it in 30 minutes. Otherwise, you have to descend lower. And any higher, about 15,000, the crew is already required to wear oxygen, but then it has to be offered to passengers. Now operating your other aircraft. We're pretty familiar with that, flying in gaggles and whatnot. But rule of thumb, just make sure the other guy knows that you're there. You don't want to surprise him with a gaggle, and also that fulfills this requirement right here. All right, and then right-of-way rules. So this is pretty straightforward. This is when aircraft are converging. So I numbered them there. The lower the number, the more priority they have. So aircraft in distress, of course, has right-of-way over everyone else. Then it goes balloon, glider, any aircraft towing. So that means gliders still have right-of-way to tow planes, but the way we kind of work around it with the club here is, you know, tow plane, they got a place to go. Glider, they got a little more maneuverability available. So that's kind of a local thing that we deal with. We tend to give right away to the tow plane more. And airships, and then airplanes, anything else powered is last.
Speaking of right of way, what happened with that collision a few months ago?
Oh, the one in Boulder?
I think it was in, there was
Yeah, it's Boulder.
another power plane hit the tow plane, I think.
Yeah, it was a Cirrus that hit a Pawnee that was towing 232, I believe. Yeah, they were at Boulder. They go out to the west towards the Flatirons, and apparently the Cirrus was somewhere to the north of the tow plane glider and just did a left turn right into the side of the tow plane. The glider pilot saw it coming, and as soon as impact happened, he already had his hand on the release and was releasing at that time. And then it just fireballed. And then the rest of the story is on the news pretty much. I was possibly going to discuss that, about some theories. And minimum safe altitudes. So you got the first one, anywhere. Should you encounter an emergency situation or power failure, you can land without damage to persons or property. In over congested areas, like Newcastle or Roanoke, 1,000 feet above highest obstacle, 2,000 horizontal, and then anywhere else, you have to be 500 feet above the surface or 500 feet away from persons or property, like over water or way out in the boonies somewhere, which we don't have very much of that around here.
What about red soaring? People,
Ridge soaring? Well, I guess technically up there, it's pretty sparsely populated, and there's not really anyone that's on top of the ridge that you know of, unless you see them.
nobody's watching.
So that is flirting with the regulatory boundary. You're definitely right there.
Well, nobody's watching. So.
All right, then altimeter settings. So I just mentioned this because I know some people like to set altimeters to 0 feet when they're at field elevation before takeoff. Technically, you're supposed to do it to the elevation of the field if you cannot get an altimeter setting. So set it to 1320. That's the way it's supposed to happen. I guess you can still do it at 0 feet if you wish, but that really helps if you're communicating with anyone else that's not at Newcastle or at another airport. Then if you're ever stuck in wave, going above 18,000, having a really good day, then you set it to 2992 if you're communicating with ATC. That way you're on the same page as them with altimeter settings. Then there's the weather booms. I won't talk through those, but the ones we do need to be particularly focused on is the Class E. Pretty much if we're anywhere up from 1,200 feet above ground level at Newcastle, we have to have at least 3 miles statute visibility, which no one would fly at 3 miles visibility, but we do often fly pretty close to clouds, and you can see 500 feet below, you have to stay that or more below the clouds, 2,000 laterally away from the sides, or at least 1,000 above. So topping out thermals, you're pushing the boundary. Then this covers the Class G element. For us, that's immediately in the pattern, and we do need mild clear clouds, which that's pretty low. All right, so that's the end of the regs. Sorry if I went through that a little quick. I want to make sure we are on time, and the idea was to make these detailed for study later, so that'll be posted on the wiki. Kevin will be up next. He'll be talking about ground ops and some pre-flight stuff.
Okay, so I'm going to refresh us all on ground ops first, and then I'm going to talk about the inspection of aging aircraft. Ground operations, remember golf carts only on the field, and lately it's been a nightmare getting a dry field out there, so be very careful. If there's any concern about the condition of the field, please walk it first. Make sure it's firm enough to fly off of. There's some gopher holes out there too that we discovered last year. I don't know what their condition is, but fixed. Okay, great. So there may be new ones popping up though. So always be vigilant when it's wet out. Half the wingspan length of tow rope in case anything happens. The glider spins around. You don't want the other wingtip to hit the tow vehicle. walking speed max when towing, and the driver should